So we're going to go over cover letters very briefly. I added those slides to this PowerPoint. So let me pull that up quickly here. And like I said yesterday, before we ended, cover letters, I don't spend a lot of time on them with students. There isn't too much information that I give to students. So generally when a student comes in for drop-ins, they're just primarily asking questions like, can you read over my cover letter? And so the only thing that we're looking for with cover letters is whether or not it's concise and if it's specific enough for the position that the student might very well be applying to. So that's what I look for in resumes. But the general rule is, you know, don't send a cover letter unless you're really, really excited about an organization, or if it's required, or if it's optional. If it says optional, I always mention to students, take a little bit of time and formulate that cover letter and customize it again. But is it required for a career fair? Generally not. But as I mentioned yesterday, if a student has 5 top employers and they really, really want to work for them, I mentioned to the student, it might be in your best interest to write those out for those top 5 organizations for a career fair. Just shows you went over and above. Cover letter, the outline, as I mentioned yesterday, it's very basic. Even in our career guide, we forgot to put full name on the cover letter example. So as you see here, the font is a little different because I realized after how many years that we don't have that listed at the top, but it'll be name, address. Again, a lot of students are omitting the street address on resumes and cover letters. That's fine. Adding their email address, phone number is very useful. In the middle of that, the date, it's just kind of standard format. Employer name, position if they have it, company name, address, and look for some sort of address for the organization, if at all possible. If the name is available, it's dear, you know, XYZ person. If it's not specific, they're not sure, they could put dear recruiting coordinator, dear recruiter, dear personnel staff, HR recruiter, however they want to name it, just something a bit more formal. Basically, there are 4 paragraphs. There are exceptions to this, especially if it's an introductory cover letter. I've only helped maybe in all these years 3 or 4 students that have an introductory cover letter. So I'm not even going to waste my time on that. But basically, you omit the 3rd paragraph. But their first paragraph is just going to introduce themselves, who they are, perhaps their degree. Yesterday, we had a little discussion about whether or not to include school. So maybe you do want to still put the formal name in the first paragraph. That might change. Second paragraph explains those qualifications, those unique qualities that the student has over and above the resume that demonstrates that they're that perfect fit for the organization. And then the 3rd paragraph, 90% of students complete a 3rd paragraph, and it's a continuation of the 2nd paragraph, but that's not what the 3rd paragraph is for. It is to show the employer that the student is interested in the organization and in the position and why they're interested. It's not about, I also work here and there and do this and do that. It's about the organization and showing that interest, and maybe even tying something together with that student's experience. Maybe they completed an internship at the competitor and they have a really unique skill, and then they discuss that employer that they're hoping to work for and integrate that within the 3rd paragraph, but not just, you know, it's all about me, all about me. So 90% of students, again, that 3rd paragraph, that's key when you're reviewing a cover letter. And then lastly, you request an interview. You ask for action, not call me for an interview. You ask. And the 4th all these paragraphs are very short, right to the point. I tell students, don't spend more than 30 minutes on a cover letter. Some students, they spend hours on their cover letter. There's no need for that. Just make sure it's written well, it's very meaningful. Employers utilize cover letters just to measure that ability for students to communicate effectively in written form. And then again, tailor those cover letters. We don't see tons of cover letters during drop-in. We have them every now and again, but we want to make sure that the student can show they have those skills, and what they can truly offer to that employer is going to be very meaningful and matches what the employer is looking for. And then just really simple, one page only. It's not anything too unbelievable. Again, 30 minutes is probably great. And so this is our example again. We didn't have the student name at the top, but I added it here. The second paragraph is a bit lengthy, right? So they're going to describe what their degree is in, maybe some of their coursework, maybe some additional qualifications from an internship, or even part-time work. The second paragraph can be really, really great if they're able to incorporate those core competencies that we discussed yesterday in the resume. And then the third paragraph talks about the organization. And then I believe I can make a valuable contribution, however the student would like to word it, but it's asking, not telling. So pretty straightforward, pretty standard, not too difficult, but I do have many examples in those binders that I have in drop-in. So I'll make sure we upload all of those onto the shared drive, like I said, and then you'll have some references should you need one. So any questions on cover letters before we get into today's training and the agenda? I hear nothing. Okay, so we're gonna just go over many different resumes, many different samples that I have. The majority of these are from Cal Poly Pomona, either current students or alumni. We're gonna kind of discuss those suggestions and or those explanations behind these particular resumes. And so I'm hoping this will be interactive. Please ask questions. Maybe I'll put a couple of you on the spot just so we can learn and develop. There's always room for improvement, even on my own resume, as I mentioned. And then I have some really good examples of CVs. They're quite lengthy, but I want to show you what those look like. Again, they're not necessarily perfect, but they're moving in the right direction. And then I have a very lengthy governmental type resume that I also wanted to show because it's very unique. It's more on the lines of a CV, but if students are applying to federal positions more often than not, this is what it needs to look like. So let me open up so I can see everybody, so I don't miss if somebody raises their hand or wants to make mention. So Sam's student here, this isn't, this was taken from a real resume. What did I do? Sorry. And some things to point out here. Oh, Sam is using a template, right? Sam has the Career Center address, right? And this looks much like the one I used yesterday, right? An objective, we have no idea where they went to school. I think it's on page 2 actually, but some positives to this, everything's separated out, albeit it's a template, which isn't something that we would suggest to the student. And their name does stand out. And there's contact information. So those are some positives. But just like yesterday, clean store, we have no idea. We don't have any point of references in regards to how long somebody has been in these positions, and lots of misspelled words. This is the second page to that one-page resume. You know, the education, the interest, that's sort of from yesterday's. Again, maybe the education should go up on page 1, particularly if it's a major that's specific to the jobs that they're applying to. And then as you see at the very bottom, we see this so often on resumes where students add references at the bottom of the resume because they have no additional information for their resume. So we work to build up the resume. But references, as a general consensus, the student can use, whoops, sorry about that, albeit not this particular example, but their name and the information, contact information somewhere on a separate sheet of paper, and then just name it, references, and then add their contacts. Students often ask, how many references do I need? I would say 3 minimum, maybe not more than 6, unless it's required that you have a dozen for an employer. I've not ever seen that, but it would just mainly be a separate sheet of paper for those references. But it shouldn't be on the resume. It looks awkward. It looks like perhaps a student's very desperate to get hired for a role. So any thoughts on it or any questions? I know this one's really, really basic. We have some other really good ones.
Mm-hmm.
As far as reference types, I'm assuming like past employers, like what are your recommendations on who they should list?
I say to students that it's those individuals who can actually speak to the requirements for the position or for your potential to be in a role. It could be a faculty member if you have a great relationship with a faculty. Could be an advisor, especially if you're a senior and you've worked hand in hand with this individual. It could be a volunteer coordinator at the food bank. It can be your neighbor if they're in a professional position, but they've seen you grow and they've seen that, not physically, but they've seen you grow with your educational pursuits, and they know how determined you are to become an engineer. And maybe they themselves, they're an architect or something like that. Sometimes students, they have family members, an uncle or an aunt who happens to own a business, and the student has helped out over time. That's fine. It works better if it's not the same last name, but then again, you know, if they can speak to the professionalism or the abilities that the student has, there's nothing wrong with that. And oftentimes, I would say the students that are first year, second year, they still have contact with different teachers that they met throughout their high school years, or coaches. It could be a religious individual that, you know, mentors them. So we're not necessarily limited, but I've seen resumes. I've interviewed students that have resumes from resident advisor leads that are they themselves students in a master's program or something like that, but they work directly under them so they could speak to those abilities. So, but maybe not more than 5 on a sheet, maybe 6, but usually it's 2 or 3. And I always let students know, make sure these individuals, these references, know ahead of time that you're adding their name and their contact to the reference sheet, because it's happened to me where suddenly I get a call or an email and I have no idea who applied to what. So always be open and transparent with your references. So I don't get too many. Sometimes we'll get students asking. So I added a little cheat sheet here. So how can this resume be changed? So there's a few things that we pointed out. This is a 2-page resume, but so you can ignore core competencies. I have it on the next page, but everything here, what do you think the student may want to look at, and what do you think you might mention to the student? Any thoughts on this example?
A more professional email, maybe?
Exactly. And it's so lengthy. And this is an alum from Cal Poly. I think they're in finance, or we're in finance. An employer is not going to type in the 20212222328. So as concise as possible on an email. So a suggestion might be, you know, Jacob, could you possibly shorten that email address, or maybe change it to something that's a little bit more professional, or maybe you could forward a different account to this Gmail, because an employer, that might get them to think, number one, why do they have so many numbers and what does that mean? And then what does stop dog mean? So yes, good point. What else?
The summary is not concise. It starts off by saying they want an internship and then ends off by saying they want just a temporary role. It's not clear.
Yeah.
They probably should omit the second sentence about holding a position as a medical biller because it's already listed in the experience.
Yep. Redundancy. It's also bold, which is interesting. Probably should look a little bit more consistent. And they're saying that they're an undergraduate. Again, yesterday we had some questions about whether or not to add the school, but they're aiming to apply knowledge. So do they have knowledge about finance or do they not? And what do they mean? It's a little out there. So yes, definitely. And it needs to be a lot more concise. And perhaps for this student who has been in sales and been a medical biller for a short amount of time, maybe they want to look at simply telling the employer, especially if they know the finance organization, that the position as financial analyst, that's exactly what they want. Because this summary also might say to an employer who's looking for an intern, wow, they want a temporary role or do they want an internship? And then the employer starts to question, is this going to be a good hire? Should I even waste my time bringing them in? So yeah, not being concise.
Maybe don't bold the bullet points.
Right. It's just, there's a lot of info. And on this sales advisor, I like the second bullet point is pretty good. It's really specific. But their first one's interesting. I use problem solving and active listening to assess customer needs. So that there's probably a better way to say that. The top ones, I think they're pretty specific. Again, sometimes we review resumes and we have no idea about what the work is, especially for me personally in engineering. So I asked the student, what do you really mean when you say this? And then if they're able to explain it, then I might ask to an engineering recruiter, would they understand these concise words that you have here? And if they say yes, they would know what this means because of this, then we move on to the next section. So yeah, I would just point out, I think I did point out that first bullet point for sales advisor, it could be something that could be worked on. And then how about their second page? So this would be the second portion of their resume towards the bottom. What do you think?
Would they want a bold education on that or no?
I'm sorry, would they want to bold
I said,
it?
would you bold education on that one?
Yeah,
Because it blends in,
it would stand out.
Maybe not bold, like,
not the whole education, just.
yeah, not like the California State Polytechnic and bachelor's, like just keep the bold to like the title. So education, related certification, those would be the only things bolded.
Should education be at the top for qualification purposes?
Yeah, you read my mind. If we look at these three areas, it's finance driven for education. And most of us probably know, but Bloomberg, that's finance driven, and campus affiliation, finance society, and real estate, that's all finance driven. And if it's, whoops, I went too far. No, That was right. If we look at their first page and they're saying in their summary, or we change that to goal, that they're looking for a financial analyst internship role, I always say to students, you're telling them what you want, but you need to tell them why you want it, and you need to prove to them how you have the skills that they're looking for that internship. And if they see medical biller, which, yeah, okay, maybe that's sort of in the accounting, maybe finance realm, sales advisor, even less so, why would you tell them where you work before you tell them, these are the reasons why I want the finance analyst internship? Showcase to them at the top, as close to the top as possible, that you're all in for finance. And if we look at the student's true GPA, they have a good understanding of the financial world. A 3.34 GPA is pretty doggone good, but the employer, after 10 seconds, they're going to see medical biller, and this is probably going to go in the trash. So, CEO, you're correct. All of this information, I think, is more useful towards the top of the resume for that financial analyst position. Now, the student put, because I worked with the student, they put core competencies because they thought they were just going to list all the core competencies. And so we had a discussion about that. And so that was omitted. But I mentioned to the student, describe how you communicate effectively, describe, the leadership that you have had as a sales advisor, or as you have had as a medical biller. And so describing it rather than just listing it is more useful. So let's move to another resume. How about this one? I took the student's name off, it didn't fit. Their name was pretty large at the top, so I had to cut it. But what do you think about this one? Anyone?
Well, they didn't start out like on their resume. Well, I don't know, first of all, if the color part is acceptable or not at the top. But I was gonna say after that, there's nothing introducing about their resume at the top,
Their name's not there, right?
Oh.
Shouldn't their name be first?
Well, I took their name
Sure,
off
took it
because it was
off.
too big.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you're right. The name's missing.
I'm just saying,
it-
they don't have no introductory up there. I mean, typically you want to have a few lines, right? So summary.
They could, a summary, a goal, if you want to use the word objective, great
Objective.
statement. Yeah, it's sort of just kind of there.
It doesn't stand out.
It
The
just-
color, I don't like the color, like the block there.
Right.
I mean, to me, it would be like somebody just walking up and handing it to someone,
Yeah.
just passing them around and saying, I'll see what I get.
Currently assisting other callers.
Yeah. And if we look, so this wouldn't get through that scan system because you have color, and this is like, I don't want to call it white ink, but that's like, that'll never get through. And this is just a personal thing, but adding that it's an address, adding that it's a phone, and adding that it's an email to an employer, don't you think they would know what those are? So why are you telling them it's a phone number here? Because we're looking for a little bit of space as well. So what I would suggest to the student in person, if you want to make it really, really pretty like that for an interview, that's one thing. But when you're going to start sending it, just be conscientious that, black ink being plain in the background is probably going to be more useful, especially if it's going to be a larger organization.
It seems kind of tight too. Everything seems kind of like really tight. Like education is touching the line right there. So it seems everything seems kind of tight, like with no space.
So the consistency under the line for education and work history, you notice they're different. There's a little more space on work history. So we're looking for consistency, right? And so pointing that out would be good. And it's just a spacing issue here. But also, it's a personal preference. I think that relevant coursework should stand out on its own with its own header, oftentimes on a resume, because it's all mushed together. And so if you want them to know you understand employment law or that you understand compensation, whatever you're truly trying to get into, maybe it should stand out, be a little bit more bold, and maybe they don't necessarily need to know all of this information about the barista position. Maybe it's more useful to be a little more top heavy in human resources, maybe, perhaps. It doesn't say business administration. That's a matter of preference for some students. You're not required to say it's business administration, but I say to students, your degree is going to look like such and such. And so, again, it's a matter of preference if students want to put that or not. And then there's a spacing issue between the word training and the word and. But what about the lines? We were discussing the lines yesterday a little bit. Do you think it's too much, or I think it looks okay, but
I think it looks nice. I'm just thinking about the scannable portion.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to be considered end of page, and then they won't even be qualified.
Yeah. So it's just, again, looking at it, seeing if they had it under each section, I would say it was a little much, but they have it separated.
Is it readable still? Like if the education is touching the line, is that okay? Does that?
Hopefully as a PDF, because even when I was adding different PDFs and sections of PDFs, the line sometimes didn't go through correctly, so I had to fix it. So
we read, like if a student comes and he has it like this, where the education's right on top of the line, would it be better just have that kind of like more, where there's more space between the line and the word, like education?
Well, I would ask the student, is this in your Word? This happens to be a PDF, but did the line come from a Word doc, or how did you create the line? I would ask the question and then let the student, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. And maybe the comment would be, the spacing looks a little off. You might want to look at that. Because again, it's their choice to create it, but we're just kind of offering some suggestions. But yeah, it's a little tight for me. I think it's a little strange, but and the only other thing that I would point out to the students, most of it looks fine. It was great that they talked about 3 baristas and that they were a supervisor. I really like the wording that the student had. I think remedying is misspelled, maybe. I don't know, maybe it's not misspelled. But trained and assessed over 6 employees. So sometimes I say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean assess them? Did you provide them feedback? What did you do in that role? Because if you can get just a little bit more information, maybe they evaluated them on performance every 3 months. That's a little bit more specific. And that's showcasing, again, that leadership that they have. Did they redirect the students or I'm sorry, the employees? So maybe discuss a little bit more if they can, or maybe they can incorporate it into another bullet point. So sometimes it's a matter of merging what they're saying together into one bullet point so they have enough room, enough space on the resume. Or sometimes we wind up just taking a couple of bullet points out because they're either redundant or they don't make any sense, or the student often says, I have no idea why I put that there.
Is there I don't know if it's considered a rule, but I know sometimes they recommend any number under 10 should be spelled out, and numbers 10 and above can be written in numerical format.
I had the same question, Zio. I think that's the APA style guide.
Yeah.
Is that apply to resumes?
That's what I use, but I don't know that there's like a standard across the board rule, but I use that. So it could say, if the student had 16 employees, maybe it would look a little bit different. But, even the student memorize ingredients and recipes for 30 specialty drinks. So I helped the students. So we kind of reformatted that so we didn't put that number in there. So even omitting that maybe could be a little more useful. This was a great student. Oh my gosh, they actually found a really good job. So that was a good thing. But yeah, what some people pay particular attention to the different styles and following, you know, it's what the student wants to do. But if it looks awkward when you're reading it, you maybe just suggest, you know, oh, kind of the consensus on APA is this, you know, again, maybe they're using Turabian instead, you know, I'm sure it's probably the same, but for me, it's, are there misspelled words? Does it make sense? Are you conveying those key responsibilities? And are you intertwining core competencies? Are you integrating that in a way that's proving to the employer you're the right fit? And then my only other thing is, if you're going to use a period, do all or none. Those are kind of my little go-to. Those are, I guess, maybe my pet peeves. And it's hard to find those mistakes, but once you start looking through them, you'll see the differences. So, but I will definitely look up and see if there's like a consensus on which style should be used for numbers. I've not ever heard that it needs to only be one way.
Sherry, should resumes ever be, blocked like on the right, rather than run through the margin?
You mean size wise?
Well, I'm saying is like, in other words, even out, like where you block it. So see how each lines are different lengths and stuff too. So in other words, where you have it so that it's blocked so that it will be an even straight line on the right or so, or no?
Oh, I see. So the square, it's a matter of preference. But what we'd like to say to students is whatever margins you use, just be consistent. Just make sure aesthetically it looks similar, left or right, just in that justification, but it doesn't have to be a square block per se. I think on cover letters, again, it's a matter of preference. So I think stretching so it's a full block, it makes it look really, really nice. But sometimes students don't like that. They'd rather just have it more free form, as long as the margins are consistent. That's what employers are generally looking at. Some students go as small as 0.5 half inch all the way around. Some use 1 inch, some use, a little bit less, a little bit more to make something fit. But if it looks really off, then make the suggestion to the student, you may want to look at, the right side a little bit, maybe want to do a return on this. It looks a little off-centered. And sometimes students just don't realize that, or they accidentally move the margin on the Word doc.
I was going to ask you, in today's times, are students starting to include, like on the top of their resumes, information like if they have social media or their LinkedIn and all too as well?
Uh-huh. And most of these actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Jerry. Most of these don't have them, probably because they're older resumes. But yeah, LinkedIn, if it's really, really long as far as their LinkedIn quote unquote address, they can go in and they can shorten it. They can customize it, I guess is probably the key term. And sometimes students have a link to their own website at Wix or whatever they're using, portfolio and what have you. But I do ask the student, is your LinkedIn up to date? Yes, great. No, I haven't used it. Well, you may want to either exclude it or fix it because employers might look at it. And are you following the organization in your LinkedIn? So Northrop knows you're following them and that you have an interest in them. So I say just be really conscientious about what you're putting on your resume. If you're not using it, maybe you don't want to add LinkedIn until you update it. Sometimes students have 9 social media things on. I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, just pick 1 or 2. It's because it might be just too cluttered too. So this is the student's second page. So if we look at the skills here, they adapt and learn quickly. They have an ability to maintain confidentiality and discretion in all concerns, issues, and situations. There's an extra period there. A basic knowledge of HR policies and best practices. So to me, the student was oversharing some of this. So they only have basic knowledge, but they graduated with the degree in HR. I would think somebody has more than basic knowledge with the degree in HR. So that was a conversation with them. And anyone can type out ability to adapt and learn quickly, but show them how you were able to do that in one of the positions you had. And then communication, verbal, written skills, they discussed that as a supervisor. So then I would go back to that front page and say, well, you're already saying that. And then the confidentiality, perhaps as a supervisor, that's what they were doing. Even in the supervisor role, at the bottom bullet point says that, maintain confidential documents of 10 employees. Maybe describe a little bit more because you just said it. So it's redundant. The other redundancy on this resume is utilizing the same term over and over again. Ability to, change it up. If I'm always saying to the student, show that you are utilizing different language to convey what it is you're trying to say. I like the word adept with current technology, but that's sort of vague. All they're talking about is MS Office application. So maybe there's some, and I think with the student, there were some HR programs that the student utilized, as well as timesheet information at both of these places that they work. So that's when I said, don't just say, you know, current technology, tell us exactly what you know, especially those that are going to be most useful in the HR world. So it's just asking those questions. If you see general or something that, like, I can adapt and learn quickly, I said, but show them how you can do that. And students don't always need a skill section either. One of my favorite resumes here with Carmen Hall. What do you think?
Everything's overloaded at the top, first of all. Her address information.
Yeah, the fonts.
It's all run together. Font is,
Yeah, font style's strange. And then her name is stretched out. So that's interesting.
Objective has a space in it too.
The objective is not so great.
My school schedule, my education, it's all about me. Well, no, tell the employer exactly what you want or what you're seeking or what you would like to obtain. Maybe it's full-time, maybe it's a part-time role, maybe it's a temporary role, internship. And again, the student might be oversharing. And for Carmen, it might be, yeah, education certainly costs quite a bit, and you've done well, and you're working hard, and you're working towards your goal. But let's maybe think about what the employer wants to see and what they're looking for, and let's look at your qualifications. Let's see what you have to offer them. And the goal or the objective is telling them exactly what you would like to obtain. Not so much what it's going to do for you, but how you can help that employer. And then I'm not sure what the summary of qualifications is here. This was very strange. Inorganizing is not a word. So, you know, some of this stuff, it's just, I'm not sure what Liard, dash, BV, drinking, I'm not sure what that was on their resume.
The major Moffer I've never heard of in my life.
Yeah, that's totally misspelled.
I mean, is this a real one or what?
Yeah, this is a real student. Yes, they're all real students or past students. This was quite a long time ago.
I mean, it's as many errors, spelling and things they are. It's more like you should tell them to take a writing course.
Right. So pointing out, you know, use spell check and just make sure that the language and the words that you're trying to convey, the reader understands them. And, you know, if you need significant guidance on that, we have the Writing Center on the campus in the library. But let's see what we can get through today. Maybe it's just one or two, you know, errors. And then maybe the student would say, well, I did it on my phone. Okay, that kind of explains why there's lots of errors. But even if you look up at the cell phone, even, you know, the parentheses are incorrect, they're inconsistent. So we have one that looks one way and one that looks another. So just little things to point out. And then California State Polytechnic University is wonderful. Can't tell you how many times they say comma Pomona. That's the official name for the school. And when do you plan to graduate? Because maybe with the mathematics degree, they're graduating in 2021, excuse me. So I wouldn't have any high school listed if they're graduating this year. This is their second page.
I think all the font is all printed inconsistent.
There's no structure. There's really
Yeah.
no,
Layout.
like there's a line under there's a line under one of them, and then there's no line under the other one. It's like there's no consistency.
Yeah.
And it looks like camp is like where it says summer day camp, but then camp is like, it seems like it's bigger. The font's a little larger.
And some of the, when we printed this, some of this is just maybe the student saved it from Word into PDF, because this is a PDF.
It seems like something got scrambled because it looks
right. Exactly. A perfect point, Gabe. And that's why I often say to students, when you save it as a PDF, make sure you go back and look at it before you send it, because it could get this wonky, and then the employer is going to think, I'm not going to hire this, but this goes in the trash. What happened? But this happens. This happens a lot when people save, including myself. So just to be mindful, and maybe the student didn't even notice it. Maybe they just printed it real quick just to get help. So just things to point out. You all know what you're doing. You don't need my help. And then I would just say at the bottom, you know, references. Yeah, don't need that there. A lot of colons here. Yeah, interesting. And playing piano, I've had students that play multiple instruments, and we discuss if they're part of a club or an organization, or if they teach students, even if they don't get paid. They might volunteer to teach the neighbor's little one piano basics. And so it's asking those questions. So you say you enjoy it for leisure. Have you ever been involved at an organization, for a religious organization? Oh yeah, I actually play the piano every weekend. Oh my goodness. And so we talk about, hey, how can we add to the activity? And, you know, read many books. Okay, that's wonderful, but you know, what are you doing? And solving math and logic exercises, what does that mean? Are you helping others? Do you get into groups? Is there a blog? Are you involved in something? And, you know, Girl Scouts is wonderful, because this individual probably did a lot within the Girl Scouts. And if they obtain lots of badges and they're doing lots of outreach, maybe they're top salesperson for cookies or whatever it is, it's pulling that information out from the student. So the resume looks really, really concise, but it also conveys that leadership. And Girl Scouts, my goodness, you learn leadership. And maybe teaching or training or tutoring someone in math or on piano, that shows the ability to communicate effectively. It also shows that they have a solid grasp in the mathematical world. So especially for math and logic. So it's just kind of asking those unasked questions. Excellent points. I have lots of these. So, how about this one?
Nice spacing for the name.
Oh, different fonts.
Yeah, just spacing issues.
My skills, me. It's all about me. What are you looking for? What's that goal? And yeah, their second page has the office assistant position, lots of misspelled words, lots of space. Cal Poly wasn't listed. Their high school was. Again, if these are individuals who are getting two majors, or they're minoring, or they're doing something that's going to be really pertinent to the positions they're applying to, maybe education should get moved up. Because does an employer want to see the office assistant position helping with scheduling, or do they want to see something within the major if they're applying to a role that's directly correlated to the degree that they're getting? And then their high school, that's misspelled as well. But then they talk about the honor classes. And so if I see that on a resume, I ask the student at Cal Poly Pomona, are you on honor roll? Do you have a scholarship? And generally they have something, and it's not even showing on the resume. So that's just showing that they really have a great trajectory for their career in those pursuits in a particular major. They have a good understanding of their major. So, and then maybe this person was a captain for the swim team, or maybe they, maybe the varsity or JV team, maybe they went to semifinals. What are they missing here? There's a lot of information we can ask the student.
So since we will essentially have 15 minutes with somebody, let's just say that we come across a situation like this, or the last few examples you've shared, where there's a lot that needs to be updated. Obviously, it's going to be hard to even focus on like details because the format itself needs to be addressed first. So let's just say by the end of 15 minutes, like we've really just been able to cover formatting issues. Would you have us recommend that they make an appointment for like a career counseling session to go over their resume again? Or what would you recommend? Because it's going to be hard to cover all this in 15 minutes. Yeah.
The only reason why I say, I'm happy to help any student. So if they're business students, send them my way, and I'm happy. I can't speak for the other specialists. But for myself, if it's a business student and they need a lot of help on it, and you work 15 minutes, hey, you know what? Schedule an appointment with Sherry during her drop-in. She's liaison to business, and maybe I missed a few things here, but I'm not sure about the other specialists. We could certainly ask. I'm sure everyone's open to that. Or you can just tell them, work on it and come back and see us again once you've worked on it. We're here till 3 today. So if you want to work on it now, or if you want to work on it tomorrow or over the weekend, come on back. We're all going to provide you help. But like I said yesterday, maybe at the beginning, is there any particular area on this resume that you really would like me to focus on with the time we have today? And they might say, well, I don't know. Well, is there a job? Is there a position? Is there something that you're completing this resume for a particular reason? Is it because you're applying to a job, or is it because it's just for class, or what brings you in today for the resume review? And that kind of, I think for the most part, that'll help you to know where you can put your energy and assess whichever section. Oftentimes when they say, it's just for class, then I give them the resume worksheet, and I kind of go through, okay, these are the different areas, looks like you have a good start here. Anything you would really like me to work on, or should we just kind of read through it? You tell me where we should go with this resume today. And asking that question lets them then decide what area And sometimes they say, oh, I don't know. I had to do it for class. All right, well, do you mind if I pick a section? It looks like you have some good areas, but maybe I could just pick one area. Yeah, that's all right. Okay, let's look at the office position, the office assistant position. Let's read through it. Sometimes I'll read it out loud or ask the student to read. Hey, why don't you read the first bullet point? Assisted in the scheduling of in-office consultations. Okay, what kind of consultations were those? You know, how many?
I was gonna say, I remember that we used to have some printouts of some sample resumes. Is that correct in the office?
Yeah, those are in the binders.
Okay, because I was gonna say, would it be appropriate or an option for if we get a student with a resume like this, and like Zia was saying, like 15 minutes would really not give us enough time to really go over a lot of this. Would it be good to say, listen, we can work on sort of the formatting and get as much done as we can in this appointment, and let me send you off with this template that I really want you to work on to help you with the formatting and the layout. And then if you need more assistance, make another follow-up appointment. Is that something that
I would call it a sample, not a template.
Oh, okay.
But I knew what you meant. And that's the whole reasoning behind the binders. Not only is it to help peer advisors or any of us, because sometimes we get those resumes and I don't know what to do. And showcasing those, everything's been changed to Billy Bronco. So if the student, you know, it's divvied up by major, and if the student wants to look at a finance or an architecture resume, we took the time a few years ago to really go through really good thorough resumes and then photocopy all of them. So the students, they can, you know, save it on their phone. And, you know, I always say this doesn't mean your resume must look like this, but maybe there's different portions that could be useful to you. And so, yeah, use them because we changed the names. Yeah, we changed the names. So, yeah, and sometimes students, they're excited about that. Oh, good. You know, especially if it's chemistry or something that's totally out of my realm. It's good that they see it a different way. Absolutely. Yeah. So those binders can be just so useful, even for myself, even for cover letters, anything like that. So it's been a while since I've looked through them because I haven't been there, but yeah, I did go through and update them, what, a year and what, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, last summer. Yeah, last summer. So
yeah, it would be kind of, I think, good sometimes because we could talk to them and tell them, but
oh yeah,
it's always like kind of good for them to see sort of a sample of how how to lay it out and things.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes. I'm glad you brought that up, Thelma. Jerry, you had your hand up.
So with that, what Thelma's asking, you're saying binders at the Career Center, but in terms of online references, should we be referencing them to look at example in the career guide? That's kind of like only where I know where they're at, but
those are other options. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of the shared drive access. I put the career guide there too. But we're limited on the type of resumes in there as well. But I'll make sure that I download, like I was mentioning yesterday, I'll download the entire binder and maybe I'll save it in different, I don't know what's going to work best for everyone, but maybe I'll put one folder that says major resume samples, and then I'll divvy them up by college. So education, business, and then you would just need to go through and find the accounting one or whichever one under each college. But I'll get all of those scanned into the shared drive. I don't think that they are there, but well, I know I didn't put them there. So that's just something that would be on my to-do list. And then I'll do a separate one just for cover letters. But I think it's a good way. You can always email it to the student if you want to do that as well. So it just depends on how much time. But yeah, it's 15 minutes is not a long time. But I think students know what direction they want to go oftentimes with the resume. And it is funny when students come in, oh, I have to do it for class. I make sure I give them 15 minutes because I want them to learn. It's developmental. I was asking questions. Sometimes it really turns into a really good conversation. And if you don't have anyone waiting and you want to take 25 minutes, that's fine. Sometimes we just don't have the time, but sometimes we do. So.
And I have another question on top of that, and I hope this doesn't sound naive in any way, but okay, so right now you're showing us resume. If the student comes into the room with us there, how are we getting their resume so that we can have it and point to it and everything?
If it's done remotely, what has worked well for the peers is they allow the student to share their screen and you talk through those sections, or you can just have them email it. Sometimes they'll email it and then you have it in front of you and then you can share your screen and show the student. And yeah, it makes it a little difficult.
It'd be easier to be pointing at it yourself and saying, look at this area or something like that.
Yeah, and
versus, versus saying, take a look at that part over there. Where over there,
Yeah. So
I don't see it right there.
I think it's easier if we have the resume so we can point it out and circle it with the mouse, but
I was thinking that ahead of time, saying is the only way I think of is for them to email it to us.
Yeah. It's easier that way, but some students, they don't want to share it. So can you scroll down a little bit? I can't see that, or can you make it bigger? It's usually don't make it smaller. It's usually, for me, it's make it bigger. I can't read it. So you get through. But 15 minutes doesn't seem like a lot of time, but it truly is, because we're not reworking, nor are we creating bullet points or telling them how to write it. We're asking questions and they can talk a little bit more. And then, oh, maybe you want to, you were promoted. Wow, that's important. So maybe take a note, or, I could put an email and give you the points that I'm making right now, or take a mental note of that. And, that way they're thinking, oh yeah, I have something to offer those employers. I forgot about that. And oftentimes you'll have a student, again, they have so much great knowledge and experience, and they're just selling themselves so short on the resume. And some of them turn into peer advisors once you meet with them too. So, all right, because it was asked, I have a theater resume here. Oh, this person was a part of the Sailor Circus for a long time, but we noticed that it's a different type of resume. And to tell you the truth, I've not ever met with a theater student who has theater experience. They've done other things. And I actually looked through, this is not a Cal Poly student, but I looked through the Cal Poly students on Handshake who had theater resumes. The ones that I looked at all seniors. They all have like Ross stores or doing something other than theater. So I had to go online to find something. But again, it's sectioned off just like any other resume. I think maybe on the resume, I think I have a second resume for theater here as well, but it shows the height, the weight, and that's a lot of information, but for that field, for these types of positions, because not everyone can be Mickey, as Valeria would say to us. And eye color and yeah, that's going to be really specific to those in this arena. But I like how this resume is sectioned off by theater, by features, right? They're saying no credits at this time, but it shows that eagerness to want to get into it. So you kind of need to be bold in that way in this field, I would say. Television, commercials, list available upon request. And perhaps that's because they have a lot of them, or they have, they're in the background for, I don't know, maybe they're SAG-AFTRA, they might be involved with something like that, and that could be why. But that's pretty common, I would say, for someone in this realm. But then they really, what I liked is that they section off that specialized training into acting, dance, modeling. So the student themselves, they're going to know what the most important area is. And I like that it says professional training and special skills. Now, perhaps, again, in this realm, jogging's important for a commercial, or bicycling or rollerblading. I could see how it would be important on commercials, right? Ice skating, loves animals. Well, they're gonna work with animals on a film. It's gonna be important, and those organizations will need to know that. They've been in parades, and so it's really tailored for the entertainment field.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily omit that at all. I think maybe for circus arts, maybe I wouldn't bold everything, and the parades and things, maybe I wouldn't bold those. But again, if it's notable for the position they're applying to, then definitely. But I like how they have everything sectioned off, and they do have lines under everything, but it's not overblown on that resume.
I like how I see Munchkin on there.
I know, I saw that. I did that just for you, Jerry.
Yeah, I was curious because of what we were going over yesterday, because I know, well, with my daughter, she's kind of in this line of work, and I just know doing a resume for her was so difficult, because all of this to me just sounded so weird to be on a resume. But also, I know in some instances they do like a headshot on a resume. Do you think that is still something that would be appropriate?
I saw it on samples. And so in modeling TV, if they're looking for a certain look for a TV series, and it showcases that in the job description, then perhaps you would want to add it. So it's, it depends. If you're a writer, you probably don't need the headshot, but you're probably going to include your headshot on the top, an 8x10, right? Either matte, glossy, color, black and white. And then on the back side, you're going to have your resume.
Right.
That happens a lot too. So I think it's a matter of preference. And again, this is real specialized. So I did see resumes that had the headshots.
Okay.
On the left side, on the left or the right. I didn't see any in the middle. But those are the ones I looked up. So
okay. So, but we don't get too many students from this area.
I don't think I've ever seen a student with a resume anywhere like this.
Okay.
Including Valeria's, because she worked for Disney. So she had a small section, but she just integrated the performance and what she did within the job at Disney.
Okay.
She didn't section it off
in this way. Okay.
Yeah. I need to find that resume, but
I was just worried if I did get a student, because I know just for this particular area, I'm going to need some extra help.
and we have resources, but I would also say that the professors in theater probably do a lot to help with resumes too.
Good.
But it's good that we have stuff. And I'm going to keep this one because I think it's a really good example. I think there's a page 2. Oh no, this is a different one. So let's see. This is for the entertainment industry. This isn't specific to theater, but they put their core qualifications. So again, a resume doesn't have to just be one specific way, but they show their professional experience that they built and painted sets for multiple productions. Maybe they want to name a little bit more. This was an entry-level resume. Let's see, production assistant, and that's a little generic with what they say there. Assisted with filming of short promotional films. Maybe you want to say a little bit more. And I know production assistant does whatever the director tells them to do, right? but then they were in marketing a little bit. So again, they were marketing and creating, developing, and helping with materials for those productions. So maybe try and pull out a little bit more, but they close it out because they have really good, solid experience. They close it out, tie it in a bow saying, not only did I do Shakespeare theater, right, during study abroad, but I also have my degree in theater. So ties it in the bow nicely. So, you know, for an entry level, it's okay. I would probably add a little bit more in the professional experience, but they're in the right direction, moving in the right direction. Doesn't hurt that they live in New York either. Study abroad, how fun. This is one of our students. This is an entirely different resume. This is for architecture. This is a master's candidate. There's a good information on here, right? What do I do with this? I go and look at other architectural resumes, right? If they're going to hand it, and oftentimes the firms are small, or how shall I say that? It's been my experience that most of the architecture firms are small. They're not huge firms. And perhaps a student would be handing this resume to the firm at a meet and greet or something like that. Just a few things that I would point out would be to make sure that you have a regular text only resume. In the event it's a larger firm, and you want to make sure the information gets sent to the employer. Also, the different colors on the resume in person, like I was saying yesterday, that's one thing. But online, maybe they won't get all of the information. So that's just something to think about. And space-wise, it looks like this is a template. So you notice that they don't have a lot of room to describe out those key responsibilities for their roles in architecture, as well as the grad teaching assistant. Help prepare online test question banks. Okay, may want to say something a little bit different. But what I find really, really great are the skills. They sectioned it off, right? So graphic software, architecture software in general. I would maybe suggest to move the architecture software at the top if the architecture firm is looking for AutoCAD, SketchUp, and V-Ray, whatever that is, right? Maybe move it if it's more important than sketching, but maybe they're looking for someone who has model making experience. And this is where I would just suggest to the student, read through the job description, whatever's most important, put at the top. Maybe model making's first on their list. Maybe you want to move those bullet points, shift them up or down, and then move your sections. But you have a great start here, and you have really good information.
Is it okay to do like the sample, do the sectioned off area, or do you recommend, like, because I know architecture is probably another specialized sort of area, or is it better for them to not separate it the way they did to the left for their skills and just kind of incorporate it into a regular sort of layout, how the other resumes are?
Yeah, I would suggest to the student to have just a real basic text only resume, just in case, left to right. But if this, and more often than not, I would say this kind of resume is going to be handed to the recruiter, because stylistically, architecture is different, just like graphic design as well. But if there's a specific job, I would just say to the student, if they're really heavy on the architecture software, then maybe switch it. Did that answer your question? Someone? Yeah, okay. So we have about 15 minutes left. So let me just show you a couple more, because I want to make sure you look at the governmental position. Antonio had some really good information, but the skills and abilities are at the top of the resume. So that's kind of strange to me, right? tell us how you have that strong sense of responsibility, showcase it. Maybe it's the GPA. Clearly, Eagle Scout, 4-time Soaring Eagle Award. I mean, GPAs in high school was great. I'm not sure what it was for Cal Poly. Maybe they have a really good GPA. But Student of the Year nominee, oh my goodness, that's showing responsibility. That's showing that they're a go-getter. And team player, well, anybody can say they're a team player, but how are you that team player? So I think the skills and abilities should be integrated again within the body of the resume and not just at the top. And then here was their work experience. So we don't know what they did as a cashier or as a CSO. Describe that leadership, describe that team player mentality, because obviously as a CSO on the campus, you have to work with others and you're put into multiple situations. So, and then at the end of this, I was also in the Marine Corps. Wow, oh my gosh, there are so many skills that are there. So that would be a further discussion with the student because the work history is really, really short. And I would argue that all these skills and abilities can be integrated in all of those positions. So it's just asking those unasked questions. But they have good information to start. I think I'm gonna skip this one because I think everybody sort of gets what I'm talking about. This is a different architecture resume. This was a Cal Poly student as well. I just wanted to point out that they've done left to right, top to bottom, but at the bottom of their resume, they put their relevant courses. And they've been in an architecture position, they've been in leadership roles, they're showcasing all of their skills. They put technical and then they put professional, so they separated them out. And then they're part of the AIA, which is fabulous. And they tied it in a bow again at the very bottom. Here's my coursework. So, and they tossed in the engineering class, I guess it would have been a class then. They tied it in there. So that's really, really fantastic, especially if they want to get into that sort of firm. So it's a pretty good example. They quantified the amount of the budget. They didn't tell us a lot about that, but they gave us some information. Their faculty really, really helped them with their resumes. Well, and now we have Allie's, and I know Allie does a great job. So for CVs, before we run out of time, like I was saying yesterday, education, elementary, junior high, community college, higher ed, county roles, state roles, international companies. I have an international CV example I want to show you. More often than not, they're going to require a CV, which is basically just a longer resume with particular sections that are going to be more notable for that specific industry. Just using my resume as an example under higher education, being a career counselor, just notating how many one-on-one appointments I have, and the developmental aspects of career counseling would probably be notated more so on my resume. Maybe affiliations, MPACE, NACE, NASPA, those, maybe presenting and those specific presentations. So in higher ed, you know, you're probably going to have more sections than not. For county roles, sometimes you're going to have a longer resume in state. Again, it really depends on the position and what you're looking to do. And then for education, it's going to be, you know, are you year one student teacher, year two, what kind of block were you in? What type of schools were you working in? Special ed, were you mild, moderate, severe, and sectioning those areas out. And we have some really, really good examples of education resumes for students in the teaching realm. But this individual, let's see. Oh, this individual was, I work with this student, they were applying to a master's, I'm sorry, not a master's program, were they? No, they were applying to a healthcare position, my apologies. But again, it's all about sectioning things off. And this was the first resume, and we worked on it just a little bit. But again, certifications, memberships, and honors. We wound up making it longer because the student thought they had to put everything on like 2 pages. So we were able to go left to right and really have some really good information. And they were able to describe some additional memberships and their skills and how those skills were really notable. But the coursework stood alone. And they had some projects that they did, and then their experience too as a behavior tech, which was really, really useful for the position they were applying to. And they had more experience as well. So again, the CV is going to be, can be 3, 4 pages, 5 pages. And it was just a matter of again, having enough room to write useful information and not just keeping it in little blocks. And I think they used columns for this, which can certainly cause a problem. So, but the coursework was great because it was directly related to the position that they were applying to, and they really needed a whole host of skills, and they had them. So they had a really high GPA, which was wonderful too. Here's the international resume. So I helped this individual as well because there were a lot of misspelled words. So clearly working on that. And they had a different kind of mobile number because that's how they would be able to get into contact or how the employer would be able to get into contact with them. So it was more just kind of spacing in the achievement section. And then again, here we go, because they're applying internationally. So a CV is, if you look, it's more conducive to Europe and those areas. So the colors and things like that, they live out that way. And so it made it easier for them to go to the organization and send it. They knew a lot of people. They were just emailing this particular resume. So again, really very, very specialized. They put a quote there. I don't know that I would do that, but that's what they felt was speaking to the organizations they were applying to. And then they added, again, achievement. So my suggestion was, maybe want to change a couple of those words and talk about something or utilize a term that's going to be more useful when it comes to that documentaries and those clients and what did you really do, and the DVD kiosk movie collections, what did you actually do for that role, and maybe there's a single term that could be used. And then, sorry, this came out really weird, but they use boxes to show their language and their computing, which are like computer skills, and then other data of interest. So again, available for traveling is useful for this field because they're in that world of entertainment, and they're also an international individual who actually is from Spain. And then lastly, let's see how many minutes. I have 6 minutes left. So governmental resume. I'm sorry. Governmental resumes are somewhat like a CV. But oftentimes the governmental agency is looking for, I think I mentioned it yesterday, the citizenship. Sometimes if it's a veteran, they can add that to their resume. If they have any federal experience, sometimes the posting will require them to answer these questions or these areas on the top of their resume, and whether or not they have security clearance, even if they had it in the past, because it does expire, so to indicate that. So it's really, really specific. And so often on a governmental resume, they want to know what sort of skills someone has. So I'm going to make sure to upload this particular one because it goes into really great details about the different elements that individuals want to think about as far as skill summaries, what looks good, what doesn't, what's best. And so it shows, like you see here, a good example, but a better example. And so that this is, again, I didn't even upload everything. It shows employment history, the name, the position, the title, and then the salary. So on a governmental resume, oftentimes they want to know what you made annually or monthly, or how long you were at the organization, rather than putting like June 2006 to June 2021. They want to know how many years. So you need to figure that out. But it's very, very thorough. We've had this for a long time. So again, here we have a good example, a better example, and the best example. So really specific for 7 years, how many employees, and they quantify savings of 15% in our recruiting expenses. So really, really gets down into specific information on governmental resumes. And accomplishments is a whole other area, computer software, everything that could be applicable, any additional training people have. This would take years to put together for some people, including myself, but what kind of education, honors and awards, voluntary, professional associations. So again, it's a really, really, really long resume. The language is really specific. They want as much detail on a governmental resume as possible. Do we get a lot of these? No, not a lot. We get a few. But again, if it's out of your scope and you don't feel comfortable and you just say, well, you know, I just want to make sure that you get everything you need. I have a really good resource. Have you ever seen a federal resume sample, or do you know the breakdown? I would even email it to the students so they would have something to reference. But what do you call it? U.S. Forest Service, USDA, that's why they're very open to dialogue with students before a student applies, so they can really talk them through the resumes as well. On Handshake, we have a lot of contacts for those federal agencies. FBI is on there. I think we have the same individual. Secret Service is a little more difficult to get information, but a lot of them host those info sessions that Jerry puts together, because they do go over a lot of what's required on a governmental resume. So we're just looking to make sure things are worded in detailed fashion. And then I just refer them to, look on the website, go to USA jobs.gov. There's some good information there. And then I would forward this information. I have some other handouts that I provide to students as well for FDIC, different agencies that are a little bit more geared toward business, but I'll make sure and add all of that information on the shared drive so you have it. Any questions? Anything I didn't cover that anyone had questions about?
I did have one real quick. I've gotten a couple calls through the front desk from faculty that are requesting help with their CVs. And I wasn't quite sure how we refer these faculty. I ended up getting some of them together with faculty within their college to get assistance, but I wasn't sure what to do, or if we get those inquiries at all through the Career Center, because I'm not going to help them.
We do get them. I No, I'm trying to, I think I've helped one faculty. Beautiful resume. It looks so nice. Ah, they had great information on there. It's rare that we get them, but yeah. Hey, Gianna, where's your resume? That's a good question, Thelma. I mean, I don't mind helping somebody, but that might be a question to ask all of the specialists at the next meeting. What
Okay.
their thoughts are on it.
I just
but-
wasn't sure because I know we're not going to start doing these until July, or at least I'm not supposed to, but I was just.
Yeah. Good question. I guess it's further discussion.